Hello! This morning another review. This box excitingly dropped through the post yesterday. It's called the Lanchi Monster 76, and as you might expect from their description, it's a 76mm quad. A tiny little brushless thing. Now immediately I thought 76mm it'd be something like my 100mm quad, but the size comparison between 100mm and 76mm, this looks absolutely giant. It's actually not that far away from your tiny whoop style. It's only like 9mm difference. I think these are 68mm motor to motor. So this is absolutely tiny, and it runs off a 2S. Spec wise, it's looking quite good. We've got Heli S 10 amp ESCs on this bottom board here. This is an F4 flight controller with a built-in OSD, very nice. And the top of the stack is a little FrSky receiver, which I'm not expecting a great deal of range of, with this little tiny wire stuck in there for the antenna. You got the normal all-in-one camera VTX 25mm and a little beeper and LED on the back. And it's running these little 60/30 props. In the box, you get a USB 2S charger. You get this little, I think this is a little 500 milliamp 20C lipo, only 20C, so pretty small. Hopefully it's going to deliver enough power. Two sets of spare props, a yellow and a clear, and a little Allen key to take them off. And the most briefest of instructions, this small pamphlet, which really doesn't tell you much, apart from telling us bind instructions and the fact it looks like it's got stick arming set up. Binding is going to be interesting because the little button is down there, just out of my finger range, so I'm going to have to use a tool to push that whilst connecting power in and having... that's a 4 pair of hands job. Couple of little issues just looking at the frame here, and I'll cut to a close-up. I noticed that the soldering on the ESC lines looks a little bit dodgy. It's either that the wire that's coated and won't solder, or they've melted a bit of the wire off when pinning it on. I was just a little bit worried about metal fatigue there, but we'll see how that goes. The other thing is the camera's held in with this little piece of foam here, and so that moves around quite freely at the back, although the lens stays still. That might need a bit of reinforcement. And the battery is just going to slip and slide around on there unless we put a bit of Velcro on there, so we will put a bit of Velcro on there. But yeah, it looks absolutely diddly. Be interested to see how this works, both indoors and outdoors of course. So yeah, let's break into Betaflight and see what it's running, see what we need to set up, bits like that.
So I went into Betaflight, and sure enough this runs a version of the Omnibus flight controller, which seems to be quite common with everything that involves an OSD. I went and had a look and was a bit confused because it didn't have any UARTs set up for, well, anything really. And this was reflected in the fact that when I went into the configuration tab, it was set up to use PPM input. I just assumed it would use S-Bus. I was also a little bit confused after reading the spec and seeing that it would support D-Shot 600. It's got its ESC set to 1-Shot 125. Weirdness again. The rest of it looks fairly standard. It's got an 8K gyro loop and a 2K PID loop, and it's got its LED strip and OSD and weirdly black box. It's actually got some memory for a black box on this board. And here's the flight modes, literally just air mode for acro and angle mode set up. And it's got the woeful default OSD, which is terrible and definitely will need changing. So I connected my controller expecting to set up my modes, and I couldn't, well, it looked like I couldn't get it to bind. What it actually was, it was binding, but nothing was reacting. After checking out everything for ages, I decided to take it apart and see what everything was connected to. I had to take the full stack off really to find out where the connections were on the board, and I took a little time before I could find a reference to this board just to find out what was connected to where and what it might be using. And what I found out is clear when looking at how it was connected to the receiver. If we look here, we can see that the yellow wire is indeed connected to PPM instead of S-Bus, but that there's two jumpers there in the middle of the board, one for PPM, one for S-Bus. So they've got it set up as S-Bus only and then connected the input to PPM, which is obviously not going to work. So what I did is desolder the PPM connection and resolder it to S-Bus. Then eventually working out it was on UART1. I thought I'd set up DShot 600 at that point and then set it to S-Bus obviously and sort out my Betaflight configuration. What happened next was I attempted to take it up for a quick hover. It went into spasm, flipped over, one of the props smashed into the balance lead on the battery and broke that. And when I checked out why this happened, I found out that the factory had fitted the wrong props. We literally had 3 props the same and 1 normal. I can't remember if it's 3 counterclockwise and 1 counter, but yeah, it looked like this. Which, you know, I should have checked to be fair, but this is an RTF quad, if I can remind you, so it should have been right from the get-go. Now, one thing I noticed about doing that quick hover indoors is that the lipos seemed to beep instantly. So I thought I'd just double check this, having corrected the propellers, and took it outside the garden. And sure enough, it seemed to go into instant beeps. This is a fully charged 2S lipo, and we're pretty much just hovering here, so that confused me. So although I'm just flying line of sight here, checking it out, I did have the Fat Sharks indoors and I was recording that, and so I wanted to see if, you know, we had a proper voltage on the battery and it, you know, that rubbish little charger wasn't just doing it. But yeah, sure enough, we were down below 6.6 within a couple of seconds of takeoff. So I'm thinking this lipo they've given us is absolute complete junk. The picture doesn't look that good either, does it? Shaking around a lot. But I went off to the field with one of my Aurora 100 batteries, which are very high C, and knew they'd be fine. So off we go, and splat, we're in the ground. Don't know why, it looked alright. Tried it again, and same thing happened. That was weird. So had a check on the field, and when I looked at it in detail this time, I found that we seem to have an ESC problem. What's weird about this is I got it home, took it apart, everything's working. Put it back together, still working. So I might have had a short on that one, which was perhaps just part of the dodgy way it was put together. So this brings us up to today, where we're about 2 weeks later when I first got this, and I'm not quite looking on this as favourably, but everything's checked out and seems to be working. So I take it for an actual FPV flight with the Aurora batteries, and we finally get in the air. A few things you can say about this quite quickly is it's still sagging the batteries. These are my Aurora batteries. I mean, the label is ATC, they might not be ATC, but they give a good 3 minutes on the Aurora, and I can go quite crazy with this one. I'm not really doing much with this, and it's really hammering the battery quite hard. Within 30 something seconds we were dipping into the 6.6s there, which is crazy. Also, there's a lot of judder on the screen. I think this is down to the props. I don't think they're any good. They're certainly not very efficient. Obviously we're going with the roughly the same weight as an Aurora, and basically have given it faster motors and uglier props to try and carry this, which I think is having an effect. That aside, the actual flying experience, aside from the fact it's juddering all over the place, if this was smooth it would be okay. It doesn't have oodles of punch because those props are absolutely tiny, but you know, it goes roughly where you want it to. What I tried to do just here is, as the battery was coming to an end already, is put it into angle mode, and when I did, it went crazy, dropped completely out of the sky. So flight 2, and I just noticed that the rates were a little slow, so it's nice to have the OSD so you can sort it out and get the kind of flying experience you wanted, but there's no magic bullet here that says make it all better. So here's what I began to notice, and after the accelerometer was obviously way out after trying to put it in angle mode for a second. What I also noticed flying in acro mode is that the quad would keep drifting over to the left. The gyro seems to drift, and I'm forever finding myself correcting the roll angle back to the right. I mean, I've got the thing flying in terms as I want it on responsiveness. It's just not very smooth and eats the battery up, and it keeps veering off to the left all the time. You know, aside from that, it's an absolute peach. So, you know, this was an okay flight. It's pretty quick for its size. If it had some decent props, perhaps more efficient, you might get more than a minute out of it, or a minute and a half, and that would be a lot better. But as it is in the configuration at the moment, it's, you know, it's not very good. There's not many quads where I can practically show their full flights, free batteries, and still have a relatively short video, but this is one of them. And I'd call this my most successful flight because I took off under my own power, I landed on purpose, and, you know, I flew around a bit. The VTX, I'm not sure. Loads of guys have gone on about, you know, you want the linear dipole instead of the skew on these little VTXs because the skews get mashed, but I'm not getting a particularly good picture here, especially when, you know, even going behind a moderate tree or making a turn, it's not great. But anyway, here comes my landing on this one. And I have got to say, even knowing where I landed in short grass, these things disappear in an instant. Do not fly this where you won't be able to find it again. So this is my last lipo, and I just left the control here just to watch the gyro drift. So I'm guessing it might be due to vibrations, and the accelerometer is even worse than how the gyro drifts out. But I figured, you know, let's just fly this battery out. Well, of course, that's what I figured. Things don't necessarily go to plan, do they? And this was a really weird one that cut this flight short. One moment I'm flying around pretty happily, no problems at all, just, you know, doing some acro things. The next we get this. And what has happened here is the quad just decided to become unbound. The receiver's got power, the wiring looks intact, and the quad is lying on the floor giving the failsafe beeps, which is I'm not bound anymore. Taking the battery out, putting the battery back in, it's still unbound, and at this point I'd kind of had enough of messing around with it. So, you know, I could call it differently able or something, but let's face facts, it's a piece of crap. It's not working on any fundamental way, and the real reason I'm so disappointed with it is because as an RTF quad, you're kind of targeting people that are new to the hobby, or people that are unable or don't want to fiddle, and all I've had to do with it is take it apart several times, fix problems that the factory should have fixed, and where is their quality control? And even after getting it flying, the gyro drifted out and it tried to kill itself, and has for now succeeded. I mean, it's probably all fixable and stuff, but, you know, why do I want to? It tried to kill its own battery, and then these EA Sheen for the Aurora 100s are pretty good batteries. I mean, these can take a hit. This thing absolutely drained the crap out of it. The actual battery it came with, aside from the fact it's killed the balance plug, just like 15 seconds before that starts beeping. So the whole design concept of this is just wrong. You can't have something that's ready to fly and won't fly, and then when it does fly with the battery included, goes for about 15 seconds before saying no, I've done. Just so disappointing, because look at it, it looks really cute, and it might look nice as an ornament on the shelf, because really that's all it's good for at the moment, I'm afraid. Yeah, I mean, thanks very much to RC Moment for supplying it. It's, you know, clearly not their fault that one of the things they supplied is a duffer.
but I do hope they look at some of the things I featured in this one, because when I'm reviewing something, one of the things I try to avoid is anybody else's review, because I don't want it to influence me even subconsciously about what I'm thinking about or how I think about flying it. And so this one I didn't catch any reviews of it. But since having to go in and fix all the problems, I'm like, is this just my reviewer's curse or is this something else? And I noticed Andy RC, who's a big UK reviewer here, had one, and he had exactly the same problem with the PPM input, where he had to resolder everything. And he actually ended up, he said he knew these props were rubbish, and he ended up using some toenail clippers to clip down some other props to make it fly smoother. I think that's one step too far for me when you start attacking other props with toenail clippers. I don't think you can call it an RTF quad. So yeah, here's the Lanchi Monster 76mm. Avoid at all costs, unless they suddenly come up, acknowledge all the mistakes, say here's version 2, we promise we fixed it, and it flies for at least 5 minutes on the LiPo we give you. And that's it. Sorry about that. Catch you later. Bye.